यस्य रूपमधिकम् प्रच्छन्नगुप्तं धनम् विद्या भोगकरी यशः सुखकरी विद्या गुरुणा गुरुः विद्या बन्धुजनो विदेशगमने विद्या परं दैवतम् विद्या राजसु पूज्यते न तु धनम् विद्या विहीनः पशुः विद्या प्रशस्यते लोकैः विद्या सर्वत्र गौरवा विद्यया लभते सर्वम् विद्वान् सर्वत्र पूज्यते ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते।
Dr. Pallavi Omkar Sawant has done her Masters in Commerce, Bachelor of Education and has qualified Maharashtra State Eligibility Test. She also holds a Ph.D. degree in the subject of Business Policy and Administration. She has been working as an Assistant Professor, Department of Accountancy in M.L.Dahanukar College of Commerce since 2015. She has to her credit one national level patent and several research papers published in renowned national and international journals. Her inclination and love for teaching has made her roots strong in the field of education. She completed her doctoral journey in a mere span of 3 years. Her study focused on knowing the overall understanding of AB-PMJay scheme and how it lays its impact on the beneficiaries of this scheme. In order to know and examine the same, she collected, analyzed and interpreted primary data from the beneficiaries who had already availed the benefits of the scheme. Through her study, she has also strived to provide suggestions to the policymakers of the scheme. Welcome, Vidyavachaspati, Dr. Pallavi Omkar Sawant.
Namaskar. I am Dr. Pallavi Sawant. Today I will be talking about my journey of PhD in brief. I always intended to do my PhD on a topic that will have social relevance. One fine day, me and my father were just randomly discussing about a newly launched government scheme meant to provide health security to poor and vulnerable section of the society. This scheme was supposed to be the world's largest government-led health insurance scheme. And the point of discussion between me and my father was that how is this scheme going to reach to its target audience, as there were many of the households covered under the scheme for getting the benefits of the scheme. And this triggered me to why not have my research area in this particular section wherein my findings, conclusions and suggestions would definitely help the beneficiaries of the scheme, and not only them but also the makers of the scheme, to know how is this scheme working, how it is getting implemented, what are the lacunas to be tapped upon, to be worked upon to make this scheme better. And this is how I selected my topic of PhD, that is an analytical study on Ayushman Bharat, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana and its impact on poor and vulnerable urban households of Thane district. After this, I started researching a lot about this scheme. While I was doing so, I came across some prominent facts. it was found that nearly 21.92% of the Indian population still falls below the poverty line. The current health expenditure of India as a percentage of its gross domestic product merely was found to be 3.54%, whereas out-of-pocket expenditure as a percentage of the current health expenditure came up to be 62.67%. It is not like that the government did not come up with any of its health schemes to overcome the above scenario. Many government-led health schemes were been then in the past launched to overcome the above scenario and walk on the path of universal health coverage. But somehow they failed to protect the target audience from the heat of financial hardships. And this is how the National Health Authority of India launched Ayushman Bharat through the recommendation given by National Health Policy 2017. And in September 2018, thus Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana was launched. Now to talk in depth about what is this scheme and how is this scheme, for whom is this scheme all about. The beneficiaries of this scheme are the bottom 40% of the poor and vulnerable population, that is over 10.74 crores of poor and vulnerable families. The scheme aims to provide a health cover of Rs 5 lakhs to the targeted beneficiaries for meeting secondary and tertiary hospitalization care in empaneled public and private hospitals, that too free of cost across India on a family floater basis. The scheme is absolutely free of restriction, as in there is no limitation on the family members to be enrolled as the beneficiaries of the scheme. Any pre-existing disease is covered from day one under this scheme. Benefits of this scheme can be availed from any corner of India. A pre-hospitalization period of 3 days and post-hospitalization period of 15 days is considered under this scheme. The scheme also works with a predetermined set of health benefit packages, as in any beneficiary who is willing to take or avail the benefits of this scheme has to select a particular or has to undergo a particular health benefit package, and only then he or she can avail the benefit of the scheme. The inclusion of the households or families as the beneficiaries of the scheme are based on deprivation levels for rural beneficiaries and occupational criteria for urban beneficiaries. These criteria are prescribed by Socio-Economic Caste-Based Census 2011. For urban beneficiaries, 11 occupational such criteria are been defined, which then come out as the eligibility of being the beneficiaries of this scheme. These are the 11 occupational criteria that define the eligibility of the beneficiaries situated in urban areas. Rag pickers, beggar, domestic worker, street worker, cobbler, hawker, other service provider working on the streets, construction worker, plumber, mason, laborers, painter, welder, security guards, coolies, sweepers, sanitation workers, malis, home-based workers, artisans, handicraft workers, tailors, transport workers, drivers, conductors, helper to drivers and conductors, cart puller, rickshaw pullers, shop worker, assistant peon in small organizations, helpers, delivery assistant, attendant, waiters, electrician, mechanic, assembler, repair workers, washermen and chowkidars. Further researching about this area, I came across another fact that Thane district is the most populated district with poor and vulnerable households as per the SECC 2011 database. And this is how I narrowed down my topic of PhD. Hence, my PhD was then focused upon to understand the impact of this scheme on the beneficiaries who particularly belong to Thane district, that is Thane district's urban area, so that it could help in bringing out the contribution of the government towards public health expenditure for the most populated district of Maharashtra with the beneficiaries of this scheme. Soon after this, I started reviewing a lot of literatures, a lot of previous literatures, previous researches, by going through research papers based on the scheme and also many such other government-led schemes. PhD theses, books, reports, national, international both, which helped to come up with some gaps in the study. These gaps later on helped me to come up with the problems of the study. These problems then helped me to draft the objective of my study. These objectives were thus then aimed to be achieved by framing hypothesis of my study. To talk about sources of my data collection, both secondary as well as primary sources were being tapped upon. For secondary data, I relied more upon the AB-PMJay official website and other such websites. Books, research papers, research articles, PhD theses, national and international reports. And in order to collect primary data, I framed a structured questionnaire. First, it was being framed in English language. Later on, as and when I started collecting my data, I realized that majority of my beneficiaries come from they have the language barrier, and therefore my questionnaire was then framed into Marathi and Hindi both, so that language won't be a constraint in collecting my data. There were certainly limitations in the study, as we know that primary data depend largely upon the respondents. How they are available, the cooperation that they give to us. Geographically also there were certain limitations, because I selected only 5 talukas, but wherein there are 7 talukas of Thane district. This is because SECC 2011 database excluded Murbat and Shahapur, stating that there are no urban households located in these 2 talukas of Thane district. The perception of the respondents differed depending upon the situation, time and experience. This was again a limitation of my study. And during my data collection, it was the COVID period which did have constraints, which did come up with hindrances. Personally, therefore, meeting the respondent was a challenge while collecting the data, but despite of all the above mentioned limitations, utmost care was taken to make the study authentic, comprehensive and productive as possible. The study which I undertook is important. It has a significance is because this study would certainly help in understanding the level of awareness of the beneficiaries across gender and age groups of the beneficiaries. It helped in knowing the perception of the beneficiaries across different talukas of Thane district with regards to the scheme. It also helped in discovering the difference in the execution of the scheme perceived by the beneficiaries between empaneled private and public hospitals. It helped in identifying the correlation between the perceived execution of the scheme and health benefits received by the beneficiaries under the scheme. It also helped in tracking the existence of corruption in private and public hospitals of Thane district. It also helped in assisting the policymakers and the government to take appropriate measures in implementing the scheme. And lastly, this study was important because it also helped in developing a better scope for future researches to be conducted on this same line of AB-PMJay scheme. Further, moving ahead to the key findings of my study based on inferential analysis. Through my study, I could really find out that the male respondents were found to be better aware of this scheme as compared to the female respondents. The perception of the respondents with regards to the benefits of this scheme was found to be more stronger amongst the respondents belonging to the Thane taluka particularly, out of the 5 talukas of my study. Respondents were found out to have perceived the execution of the scheme better in empaneled private hospitals than in empaneled public hospitals. It was also found that with better execution, better health benefits were received by the respondents. Respondents availing the benefits of this scheme from public hospitals were found to experience more corruption than the respondents availing the benefits of the scheme from private hospitals. Moving ahead to conclusion and suggestions of my study concluded that awareness level of this scheme differed significantly across the different age groups of the beneficiaries. Awareness level of the AB-PMJay scheme differed significantly across the gender of the beneficiaries. There existed a significant difference between perception of the scheme amongst the beneficiaries and different talukas in Thane district. Perceived execution of this scheme among the beneficiaries differed between empaneled private and public hospitals of Thane district. There was a significant correlation between perceived execution of the AB-PMJay scheme and health benefits received by the beneficiaries under this scheme, as it had a moderate positive correlation between, as the study could conclude a moderate positive correlation between perceived execution and health benefit received by the beneficiaries from the analysis. There was a significant difference encountered in the experienced corruption in AB-PMJay scheme by the beneficiaries between empaneled private and public hospitals of Thane district. Moving ahead to the suggestions of my study, majorly the suggestions of my study were inclined towards the policy makers of the scheme. Proper awareness campaigns should be arranged for propagating the scheme amongst its target audience. I also suggested to provide a good orientation to the Arogya Mitras. Now these are the ones who are deployed across the empaneled private and public hospitals that render the services of this scheme. So these are the ones who are basically deployed in such hospitals to help the beneficiaries, as in to understand how is the scheme going to benefit them, what are the documentation processes and this and that to be done. So these are the people, I would say, the Arogya Mitras, who would then, if they get proper orientation, they would really certainly help to propagate this policy as good as possible amongst the beneficiaries, and this will certainly help the beneficiaries to avail more and more benefits of this scheme. Different style and system of advertising the scheme should be used to spread the awareness of the scheme. This was my third suggestion been given to the policymakers of this scheme, and nowadays on railway platforms we can certainly hear a lot of advertisement been done on Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. A lot of advertisement announcement is carried on so that people will be more aware about this scheme. Proper focus should be placed on increasing the empanelment of hospitals under this scheme. Subjective health benefit packages should be drafted. There are very restricted, I would say, health benefit packages, somewhere 1,300 approx, but there should be more subjective health benefit packages that should be introduced in this scheme, which will provide more benefits to the beneficiaries of the scheme. The scheme covers only 3 days of pre-hospitalization expenses. Now this can be increased, this period can be increased to 5 days, say a week time, so that a good decent amount on diagnosis that the beneficiaries spend before the actual hospitalization can be covered by, and can really help the beneficiaries of this scheme. The sum insured of the scheme should not be uniform across India. Now why is this point suggested through my study as a suggestion is because there are many people who stay in cities and then in rural areas. Certainly their cost of living differs. So having a same and a common sum insured for both type of beneficiaries is not suggestible, and therefore it should be worked upon by the policymakers of the scheme. Flying squads should be deployed to randomly check the execution of this scheme. This will certainly help to, such surprise visits will help to know as in what is the reality of this scheme, how is it working, how it is really getting executed. A robust grievance redressal system should be, should be deployed so that it can help the beneficiaries to be very easily connected with the scheme, with the actual administration of the scheme, to give proper feedback of the scheme, how are they facing the scheme, what are the problems that they are facing in general. Proper feedback system should be maintained so that the beneficiaries could experience from the scheme and its benefits can be known to the hospitals, policymakers, government and every other authority involved. Lastly, moving ahead to the scope for future researches. My study has laid a very good scope for future researches to be conducted, as very few researches were undertaken on this scheme. This study certainly was carried out to understand the level of awareness of the features of the scheme amongst the respondents who have used this scheme. Future researches can be undertaken on such beneficiaries who have not availed the benefits of this scheme. Only perception of the respondents was understood in this study. Further satisfaction level of the beneficiaries can be studied by future researchers. Also, the study strive to understand the beneficiaries' overall perception with regards to the scheme. Further research can be conducted to know the perception of the beneficiaries before and after using the scheme. Under this study, I tried to find out a correlation between perceived execution of the beneficiaries for the scheme with the health benefits that the beneficiaries received. Further studies can be undertaken to find out how and in what sense different parameters of the scheme are related to each other. The present study focused on studying everything with perspective of the beneficiaries. Future studies or further studies can be undertaken with the perspective of the providers to understand their perspective with regards to the scheme, as in the hospitals, the perception can be undertaken and understood. Also, a comparative study can be undertaken. This will help to know as in where the present scheme stands in comparison with the other state-led government health insurance scheme in terms of performances. Now, this is something that I would like to talk upon, as in any person who would like to know the eligibility of him or her with regards to the scheme. That person can straight go to the website of the scheme, which is very much visible on the screen. After that, the person can dial either 14555 number through his phone and can check his or her eligibility, or can also go on the portal where we can see am I eligible part, a section given there. By clicking on that part as well, the person can come to know about his or her eligibility. The third option is to find hospitals section. This is the section wherein the person willing to know the eligibility for this scheme can find the hospital nearby his vicinity or her vicinity, can go to that hospital directly, meet the Arogya Mitras and can find out the eligibility for the scheme. Now to talk about how this scheme is deployed in Maharashtra. AB-PMJay schemes works in a very flexible mode, as in it works in 3 different types of models. The 3 different models are assurance model, insurance model or mixed model. When it comes to mixed model, under mixed model, AB-PMJay scheme will always get associated with the state-led health insurance scheme. Now this is basically to work better and in a very, I would say, convenient way. Now in Maharashtra, before AB-PMJay scheme, we already had our own state-led health insurance scheme, that is Mahatma Jyotirao Phule Jan Arogya Yojana, and that is the reason AB-PMJay scheme got integrated with MJ-PJY scheme on 1st April 2020 for better execution and expansion. Thank you.
ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रमिह विद्यते